The bonding ceremony was supposed to be the beginning of everything. That is what Vailin had believed. That is what the entire kingdom of Valdemir had expected. Hundreds had gathered in the great hall beneath the ancient moon banners, holding their breath as the Alpha King took her hand in front of his throne. Then he spoke the words no one anticipated. "I reject this bond." 4 words. That was all it took to shatter a future. 4 words spoken in a voice so cold it could have frozen the torches on the walls. The crowd gasped. Some covered their mouths. Others turned away as if witnessing something too painful to watch. Everyone expected her to crumble, to weep, to beg, to fall at his feet and plead for a reason. She did none of those things. Vailin released his hand slowly. She looked at him for one long, steady moment, her amber eyes dry as autumn leaves. Then she turned and walked down the great hall, past the murmuring nobles, past the pitying stares, past the doors that guards scrambled to open for her. Her spine never bent, her chin never dropped. And the Alpha King, the most powerful ruler in the northern territories, the man whose name made warriors kneel and enemies flee, he watched her leave, like a man watching his own heart walk out of his chest. So now the kingdom whispers the same question. Why would a king who had everything destroy the one bond that could have saved him? Vailin. The dress weighed more than she expected. Ivory silk layered with threads of silver, a gown fit for a Luna, the seamstress had said 3 days ago while pinning the final hem. Vailin had stood perfectly still during every fitting, afraid that if she moved too much, she might wake up. This was a dream. After all, it had to be. Girls from Thornwick did not marry kings. She walked now through the great hall of Valdemir, each step measured and each breath deliberate. The aisle stretched before her like a river of polished stone, and on either side, the nobility of the northern kingdom stood in rigid silence, their faces blurred at the edges of her vision. She kept her eyes forward, fixed on the man waiting at the end. Alpha King Corvain of House Ashford. He stood before the ancient throne, bathed in the silver light that poured through the moon windows above. Tall, broad. His dark hair fell past his jaw, framing a face carved from winter itself. Sharp cheekbones, a mouth that rarely smiled, and eyes the color of a storm gathering over black water. Those eyes watched her approach now. Vailin's heart pounded so hard she thought the entire hall must hear it, but she kept walking. 1 foot, then the other. She had practiced this, had rehearsed the vows in her small room at the guest quarters until the words felt like part of her own pulse. She reached the dais, stopped, lifted her gaze to meet his. For a moment, something flickered in those storm-gray eyes. Something that looked almost like pain, but it vanished so quickly she thought she must have imagined it. The high priestess stepped forward, her voice ringing through the hall. "We gather beneath the eyes of the moon and the old blood to witness the bonding of Alpha King Corvain of Valdemir to Vailin of Thornwick. If any speak against this union, let them speak now or carry their silence to the grave." Silence. Then the priestess turned to Corvain. "Do you, Alpha King, accept this woman as your bonded Luna, your partner in rule, your soul's anchor until the moon takes you home?" Vailin held her breath. Corvain looked at her. His jaw tightened. A muscle jumped beneath his eye. His hand, the one that was supposed to reach for hers, stayed at his side. The silence stretched. Then he spoke. "I reject this bond." The words hit her like a blade sliding between ribs. Clean, cold. She felt the impact before the pain registered. The hall erupted in gasps. Someone dropped a goblet. The sound of metal striking stone echoed like a death knell. Vailin stood frozen. "This union," Corvain continued, his voice flat and terrible, "will not proceed. The woman before me is unfit to stand beside the throne of Valdemir. Unfit." The word wrapped around her throat like a noose. She saw the nobles lean toward each other, whispers spreading like wildfire. She saw the pity in some faces, the satisfaction in others. She saw his mother, Lady Venora, standing near the throne with a small, cold smile curving her lips. And she saw him. Corvain had not moved. He stared at her as if waiting for something. For tears, perhaps. For begging. For the collapse that everyone expected. Vaylin felt it all. The humiliation burning in her chest, the grief clawing at her throat, the question screaming inside her skull. Why? What did I do? What changed? But she also felt something else. Her mother's voice, soft and steady, from years ago. Never let them see you break, my love. They can take everything else, but they cannot take your dignity unless you hand it to them. Vaylin breathed in slowly. She looked at the man who had just destroyed her future in front of everyone she would never see again. And instead of crumbling, she spoke. "Very well, Your Majesty." Her voice came out steady, clear, unbroken. She saw his eyes widen slightly, just a fraction. "I wish you and your kingdom well." Then she released the skirt of her gown, turned, and began to walk. The hall had gone utterly silent. Every noble, every guard, every servant stood frozen as she passed. She felt their stares like heat on her skin, but she did not look at any of them. Her footsteps echoed. One step, another. The doors grew closer. 20 feet. 15. 10. She heard a sound behind her, a sharp intake of breath, almost like someone had been struck. But she did not turn around. The guards pulled the great doors open, and Vaylin walked through them with her head held high and her eyes completely dry. The doors closed behind her with a sound like the end of the world. And only then, in the empty corridor where no one could see, did her hands begin to shake. Corvain. The doors closed. She was gone. Corvain stood on the dais with his fists clenched so tightly his bones ached, watching the space where she had been. The ivory train of her gown had left a faint impression on the polished stone, like a ghost refusing to disappear. He had expected tears. He had expected pleading. He had prepared himself to watch her break, to harden his heart against her pain, because breaking her now was the only way to save her. She had not broken. She had looked at him with those amber eyes steady as sunrise, and she had wished him well. Then she had walked away like he was nothing, like 3 months of letters, of conversations, of the quiet moments when he had almost let himself believe had meant nothing at all. The hall stirred around him. Whispers rose like a gathering swarm. He heard his mother's voice cut through the noise, calm and satisfied. "The ceremony is concluded. Return to your duties." Corvain did not move. "Your Majesty." Lord Setheric appeared at his elbow, the High Chancellor's narrow face carefully neutral. "Shall I have the guards escort her from the grounds?" "No." The word came out sharper than intended. Setheric's eyebrows rose. "She will leave on her own," Corvain said, forcing his voice level. "See that she is given a carriage and safe passage to the border." Nothing more. And nothing less? His mother's voice came from behind him now, smooth as poisoned honey. Corvain turned. Lady Venora stood in her customary place near the throne, draped in deep blue velvet and silver chains. Her face was beautiful in the way winter was beautiful, elegant and utterly without warmth. She looked at him with approval, and the sight made something in his chest curdle. "You did what had to be done," she said. "The bloodline of Valdmir cannot be diluted with common stock. You understand that now." He understood nothing. 3 days ago, he had been ready to bond with Vaylin, ready to place the crown of the Luna on her head and damn anyone who objected. He had not cared that she came from a small village near the southern border. He had not cared that her family had no titles, no wealth, no standing. He had cared only that when she spoke, he listened. That when she laughed, His chest ached in a way he could not name. That when he read her letters, her words slipped past every wall he had ever built. Then his mother had come to him with the evidence. "She is not what she seems," Venora had said, spreading the documents across his desk. "Her family has debts, significant ones, to Lord Talvish of the Eastern Reach." Corvain had stared at the papers, contracts, ledgers, a letter bearing Valen's name. "She was bought," his mother continued. "Talvish paid her family's debts in exchange for access to the crown. Once she became Luna, he would have had influence over every decision you made. She is a planted spy, my son. Nothing more." The words had carved through him like claws. He had not wanted to believe it. But the evidence was there. Her handwriting on the letter. Her family's debt suddenly vanished. Talvish's known ambitions for the throne. And yet, when he had stood before her at the ceremony, when he had looked into her eyes, he had seen no deception, no cunning calculation, only hope, fragile and earnest, only pain, when he had shattered it. "Your Majesty." Corvain blinked. His mother was watching him with those calculating eyes. "You seem troubled," she said. "Do you doubt the decision?" "No," he lied. "Good." She touched his arm, brief and cold. "A king cannot afford sentiment, especially not for a woman who would have used you as a stepping stone. Now come. There is much to discuss." She turned and walked toward the council chamber, and Corvain followed because he did not know what else to do. But as he walked, he passed the spot where Valen had stood, where she had looked at him without tears and wished him well like he deserved it. His wolf stirred inside him, not the restless prowl of agitation, but something deeper. A howl building in his chest that had no outlet. She had not begged. She had not wept. She had simply walked away with more dignity than any noble in this hall possessed. And Corvain, Alpha King of Valdmir, conqueror of 3 territories, master of 10,000 soldiers, felt something fracture inside him that he did not know how to repair. That night, alone in his chambers, he pulled out the documents his mother had given him. He read them again, and something in the way the words sat on the page felt wrong. Like a melody played in the wrong key, close enough to fool the ear, but not the heart. He did not sleep that night, or the night after, or the one after that. Valen. 2 months passed like water over stone, slow and grinding. Valen had returned to Thornwick 3 days after the ceremony, riding in the carriage the king had provided, staring out the window at forests and fields that should have felt like home, and instead felt like exile. Her mother had met her at the door of their small cottage, taken one look at her face, and pulled her inside without a single question. For the first week, Valen had barely spoken. She woke, ate what was placed before her, helped with whatever chores needed doing, and went to sleep. The motions of living without any of the feeling behind them. Then, on the 8th day, she had found the garden overrun with weeds. She had knelt in the dirt and begun to pull them out, one by one. Her hands had blistered, her back had ached. But something about the work, the simple violence of tearing unwanted things from the earth, had loosened the knot in her chest just enough to breathe. After that, she worked. She repaired the fence that had been sagging for 2 winters. She cleared the old shed and turned it into a space for drying herbs. She walked into the village market with her head high and met every curious stare without flinching, letting them whisper about the girl who had been rejected by the Alpha King, letting their pity and their curiosity wash over her like rain. She did not break, and slowly, impossibly, she began to rebuild. It was on a morning in late autumn that she found the child. Valen had been walking the forest path that led to the river, gathering mushrooms for her mother's stew, when she heard a sound that stopped her cold. Crying, small and muffled, like someone trying very hard not to be heard. She followed the sound off the path, through a thicket of blackthorn, and found a hollow beneath an ancient oak. Curled inside, knees drawn to chest, was a girl no more than 6 years old. Dirty face, matted hair the color of rust, and eyes, when they lifted to Valen's face, that held the particular emptiness of a child who had learned too young that the world was cruel. "Hello," Valen said softly, crouching at the edge of the hollow. "Are you hurt?" The girl flinched but did not run. "My name is Valen. I live in the village nearby. Are you lost?" A pause. Then, barely audible, "I am not lost." "No? Where is your family?" The girl's face crumpled. "Gone. Gone," Valen repeated. "The soldiers came." The girl's voice was thin as paper. "They took everyone. I hid. Mama told me to hide and not come out until it was quiet." She squeezed her eyes shut. "It has been quiet for a very long time." Something old and terrible moved through Valen's chest. She had heard rumors of raids in the outer villages, disputes over territory, the king's men enforcing borders with blood. The king. She pushed the thought away. "What is your name?" Valen asked. The girl hesitated, as if unsure whether names were safe to give. "Ren," she said finally. "Ren," Valen repeated. "That is a beautiful name. Like the bird." Mama said wrens are survivors. Valen felt her throat tighten. She looked at this child, this small fierce thing who had hidden in a hollow and waited in the cold and not broken, and she saw something familiar. "Come with me," Valen said, extending her hand. "You can eat. You can rest. And then we will figure out what happens next. Together." Ren stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, her small fingers wrapped around Valen's. 2 weeks later, Ren had not left. She slept in the corner of Valen's room on a pallet of quilts, and she ate everything placed before her with a determined silence that broke Valen's heart. She did not speak much, but she followed Valen everywhere, a small shadow with watchful eyes, learning the rhythms of the cottage, the paths through the village, the names of the herbs in the drying shed. "She is attached to you?" Valen's mother observed one evening, watching Ren help sort dried lavender with careful fingers. "You understand what that means?" "I do," Valen said. "You cannot send her away now. It would destroy her." "I know." Her mother studied her face. "This is not a wound you can fix, Valen. She is not a broken fence or an overgrown garden. She is a child who has lost everything. Taking her in means keeping her. Forever." Valen looked through the doorway at Ren, who was humming softly to herself, a tune that sounded like something half-remembered. "I know," she said again, "and I am not sending her anywhere." That night, Valen tucked Ren into her quilts and began to turn away. A small hand caught her sleeve. "You will not leave?" Ren whispered. Valen knelt beside her. "I will be right here in the morning. Promise?" The word struck something deep in Valen's chest. A memory of standing in a great hall, of promises that had meant nothing. "I promise," Valen said, and she meant it. A week later, the rider came. Valen was in the garden, Ren beside her pulling weeds with focused intensity, when the sound of hooves made them both look up. A horse, black as ink, carried a figure in a dark traveling cloak down the village road. The rider stopped at the gate. Valen rose slowly, her hand finding Ren's shoulder. The rider dismounted and pulled back his hood. She did not recognize him. A young man, perhaps 20, with the sharp features and rigid posture of someone trained in a noble house. He looked at her with careful assessment. "Valen of Thornwick?" he asked. "Who is asking?" "I am Yorveth, sworn messenger of House Ashford." He reached into his cloak and produced a sealed letter. The crimson wax bore an emblem she knew too well. "I carry a summons from Alpha King Corvain." Valen felt the world tilt. "The king summons you to Valdmere," Yorveth continued. "Immediately. He says it concerns a matter of grave importance regarding threats to the southern villages." The letter hung in the air between them, and behind the messenger, barely visible through the trees, Valen saw something that made her blood run cold. A second rider. Watching. Not approaching. On a horse she recognized. A horse she had last seen in the courtyard of the Great Hall on the worst day of her life. Corvain. 2 months, 63 days since she had walked out of the Great Hall with her spine straight and her eyes dry. 63 nights since Corvain had last slept more than a handful of broken hours. He stood now at the window of his war chamber, staring out at the courtyard below where soldiers trained in the gray morning light. Their movements blurred at the edges of his vision. Everything blurred these days. "You look terrible, Your Majesty." Corvain did not turn. Lord Brennick stood somewhere behind him, the old general's voice carrying the particular blend of respect and bluntness that came from 3 decades of service. "I am fine. With respect, you are not." Brennick moved closer, his reflection appearing faintly in the glass. "You have not eaten properly in weeks. You snap at your advisors. You train until your hands bleed and then train more. The men are beginning to whisper. Let them whisper. They say the king is haunted." Corvain's jaw tightened. "They say you have not been the same since the ceremony, since the girl from Thornwick." The name hit him like a fist to the chest. He turned sharply. "Do not speak of her." Brennick held his gaze, unintimidated. "Someone must. Your mother has forbidden any mention of her name in the council chambers, but I am not your mother, and I am not blind. Whatever happened that day broke something in you. Nothing is broken." "Then prove it." Brennick crossed his arms. "The Eastern Reach grows restless. Lord Talvish has been making moves along the border, testing our defenses. There are reports of raids on villages near the southern territories. Your kingdom needs a king who is present, not one who stares out windows like a man searching for something he has lost." Corvain felt the words land, each one a small blade. He wanted to argue, to dismiss the old general's concerns. But he could not, because Brennick was right. He had been searching. Not consciously, not openly. But every report that crossed his desk, he scanned for mentions of the South. Every messenger from the outer territories, he questioned about conditions near the border villages. Every name that surfaced in conversation, he measured against the only name that mattered. Valen. He had not spoken it aloud in 2 months, had forbidden himself even the shape of it in his thoughts. But it lived in him anyway, carved into some deep place he could not reach. "The raids," Corvain said, forcing his mind back to duty. "Where exactly?" Brennick's expression shifted, satisfaction at finally being heard. 3 villages near Thornwick. Small settlements. The attackers wore no colors, left no survivors to identify them. Corvain went very still. "Thornwick." "Yes." Brennick frowned. "You know it?" Corvain turned back to the window, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with military strategy. "What is the status of the village itself?" "Untouched, so far. But the pattern suggests it may be next. Send a patrol. Double strength. I want those raiders found and brought to me alive." "A patrol?" Brennick sounded surprised. "For a border village? Do you question me?" "No, Your Majesty. But your mother may have opinions on the allocation of resources to such a remote." "My mother," Corvain interrupted, "does not command my armies." "I do. Send the patrol. And send a summons to Valen of Thornwick. Tell her it concerns the safety of the southern villages." Brennick studied him for a long moment, something calculating in his old soldier's eyes. Then he nodded. "As you command." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "The girl," he said quietly, "the one you rejected. She was from Thornwick, was she not?" Corvain did not answer. Brennick's silence said enough. The door closed behind him. Corvain stood alone in his war chamber, surrounded by maps and strategies and the weight of a crown he had never wanted, and thought about a woman who had walked away without tears. If the raids reached Thornwick, if something happened to her because he had sent her back to a place that was no longer safe, he would never forgive himself. But then he had not forgiven himself for anything in 2 months. That evening, after sending Yorveth with the summons, he went to the archives. The evidence his mother had shown him, the documents that had damned Vaylin, were stored in a locked chest beneath the old records. He had not looked at them since the ceremony, had not been able to bear it. Now he spread them across the table and studied them with new eyes. The letter bearing Vaylin's signature, the debt ledgers from her family, the contracts linking them to Lord Talvish. He read every word. And the more he read, the more the wrongness he had felt that night returned. Stronger now. Sharper. The handwriting on the letter was close to Vaylin's, but not identical. He had read dozens of her letters during their courtship. He knew the way she curved her letters, the particular slant of her words. This was similar, but it was a copy. A forgery. The debt ledgers listed sums that seemed too precise, too convenient. And the contracts bore seals that looked authentic at first glance, but showed subtle inconsistencies when examined closely. His hands began to shake. He had been deceived. Not by Vaylin, by someone who wanted him to reject her. Someone who had access to documents and seals and the knowledge of how to create a convincing lie. Someone who had smiled when Vaylin walked out of the great hall. Corvain looked up slowly, his blood turning to ice in his veins. His mother. The door to the archive opened. My son. Lady Venora stood in the entrance, her expression mild, curious. What are you doing down here at such a late hour? Corvain looked at the woman who had raised him, who had guided him, who had shaped him into the king he was. And for the first time in his life, he saw her clearly. I was looking for answers, he said carefully. I believe I've found them. Something flickered in her eyes. Just a flash, there and gone. Satisfaction, perhaps. Or warning. How wonderful, she said smoothly. Perhaps you can share them with me, and then we can discuss more pressing matters. The Northern Princess, Lady Isvara of House Crethon, arrives next month. Her family is eager to formalize the alliance I have been arranging. Alliance, Corvain repeated flatly. Marriage, Venora corrected. A proper match this time. One befitting your station. Corvain felt cold rage settle into his bones. Soon, he said. We will discuss everything soon. He gathered the documents and walked past her, feeling her gaze on his back like a blade pressed between his shoulders. He could not confront her. Not yet. Not until he had proof beyond doubt. But he could ensure that Vaylin was safe. The next morning, before dawn, he rode out himself to follow Jorveth's trail. Not to approach, not to speak. Just to see her one more time. Just to make sure she was alive. He did not sleep that night either. But for the first time in 2 months, it was not grief keeping him awake. It was fury. Vaylin. She had not wanted to return to Valdmere. Every instinct had screamed at her to refuse the summons, to send the messenger back with nothing but silence, to stay in Thornwick with Wren and her mother and the life she was rebuilding, far from the man who had shattered her heart on a stage. But the messenger had spoken of grave importance, of matters concerning her safety and the safety of the southern villages. And the second rider, the one she had glimpsed through the trees, had not appeared again. She had questions. And questions, her mother always said, were more dangerous when left unanswered. So here she was. The carriage rolled through the great gates of Valdmere as the sun dipped toward the mountain peaks, casting the fortress in shades of gold and shadow. Vaylin watched through the window with carefully controlled features, refusing to let memory overwhelm her. The courtyard looked the same. The banners still rippled in the wind. The guards still stood at attention with their polished armor and expressionless faces, but nothing felt the same. The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door. Vaylin stepped out. Ren's small hand clutched tightly in her own. She had refused to leave the child behind, and no argument from the messenger had swayed her. Where she went, Ren went. That was simply how things were now. Lady Vaylin. A steward approached, bowing. The king has requested your presence in the Great Hall. Of course he has, Vaylin thought bitterly. The same hall where he destroyed me. But she said only, "Lead the way." They walked through corridors she remembered too well, past tapestries she had once admired, through doorways she had imagined passing through as Luna. Ren pressed closer to her side, overwhelmed by the grandeur. "It is all right," Vaylin murmured. "Stay close to me." The great hall doors opened, and there he was. Alpha King Corvain stood at the far end of the hall, near the throne but not seated on it. He wore no crown, no ceremonial robes, just dark clothing that made him look less like a king and more like a man with shadows under his eyes, a man who looked like he had not slept in weeks. Their eyes met across the distance. Vaylin felt the impact in her bones. Anger and grief and something else, something she refused to name, all tangled together in her chest. She walked forward, Ren beside her, and stopped at a careful distance from the dais. "You summoned me," she said. Her voice came out steady. "Good." Corvain's throat moved. He looked at her like a man seeing water after days in the desert. Then his gaze dropped to Ren, and something shifted in his expression. "Who is this?" he asked quietly. Vaylin's hand tightened on Ren's shoulder. "Her name is Ren. She is under my protection." Something flickered in his eyes at that phrase. Recognition, perhaps. He had used those same words once. "The child is welcome here," he said. Ren said nothing, only stared at the king with the wary assessment of a creature who had learned that powerful men brought danger. "You said this concerned my safety," Vaylin continued, "and the safety of the southern villages. Explain." Corvain looked at her for a long moment. Then he spoke. "The documents that led to your rejection were forged." Vaylin went very still. "You were accused of being a spy for Lord Talvish," he continued, "of using your family's debts as leverage, of being planted to manipulate the crown. None of it was true. The evidence was fabricated. The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples through everything she thought she knew. "Fabricated," she repeated. "By whom?" Corvain's jaw tightened. "I am still determining that. But you have suspicions." His silence was answer enough. Vaylin felt rage building in her chest, hot and bright. "So you rejected me, humiliated me in front of your entire kingdom, destroyed my reputation and my future, based on lies." "Yes." "And now you summon me back to tell me this?" She stepped forward, trembling with fury. "What do you expect, Your Majesty? Gratitude? Forgiveness? An opportunity to make it right?" "I expect nothing." His voice was raw. "You owe me nothing. I brought you here because the same forces that targeted you are now targeting the villages near Thornwick. The raids, the attacks. They are connected. Whoever wanted you destroyed wants something larger, and I believe you may still be in danger." Vaylin stared at him. He was telling the truth. She could see it in every line of his body, in the exhaustion carved into his face, in the way he looked at her like she was something precious he had broken and could not repair. And it changed nothing. "You destroyed me," she said softly. "In front of everyone. You made me nothing." "I know." The words cracked. "I know what I did. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to atone for it." Ren tugged at Vaylin's hand. "Vay?" Vaylin looked down at the child, at her worried face and uncertain eyes, and felt something settle in her chest. Hard and clear. She looked back at the king. "I will stay," she said, "until the threat is resolved and my village is safe. Then I am leaving, and I am never coming back. Do you understand?" "Yes." Good. She turned to go, then stopped. The rider, she said without looking back. The one who followed Yorveth. Who watched from the trees. That was you, was it not? Silence. Then, quietly, yes. Why? Because I could not stay away. His voice was barely audible. Because I needed to see that you were safe. Even from a distance. Even if you never knew. Valen felt her heart stumble. She did not turn around. Do not do it again, she said. Then she walked out without looking back. That night, in the guest chambers she had been given, Valen sat by the fire while Ren slept in the bed behind her. She had not cried in 2 months. Not since the ceremony. She had promised herself she never would. Not over him, not over something she could not change. But sitting here, in this fortress that should have been her home, with his apology echoing in her ears, and the truth of his betrayal settling into her bones. One tear fell, then another. She wiped them away quickly, fiercely, before they could multiply. In the bed, Ren stirred. Vey, are you sad? Valen turned, forced a smile. Just tired, little bird. Go back to sleep. Ren studied her with those 2 old eyes. That man. The king. He hurt you. It was not a question. Yes, Valen admitted. He did. Ren was quiet for a moment. Then, will you hurt him back? Valen thought about it. No, she said finally. Hurting him would not fix anything. Ren considered this. Then he should fix it himself. Out of the mouths of children. Valen crossed to the bed and lay down beside Ren, pulling the quilts over them both. Maybe he should, she murmured. We will see. Ren's hand found hers in the darkness. I will protect you, the child whispered, if he tries to hurt you again. Valen felt her heart crack open just a little. I know you will, she said. But I will protect us both. I promise. They fell asleep holding hands, and somewhere in the fortress, in his chambers far above, Alpha King Corvain stood at his window and stared at the stars, and wondered if there was any redemption for a man who had destroyed the only good thing he had ever been offered. Corvain. 3 days passed. 3 days of seeing her in corridors and across courtyards. 3 days of watching her walk past him without a word, her chin lifted, her eyes forward, as if he were a piece of furniture. 3 days of watching the child, Ren, study him with suspicion every time he drew near. He deserved all of it. On the 4th day, his control broke. He found Valen in the library, seated at a table near the windows with Ren beside her. The child was practicing letters on a slate while Valen guided her hand, patient and gentle in a way that made his chest ache. He stopped in the doorway, uncertain. Ren saw him first. Her hand stilled, her eyes narrowed. Valen looked up. For a moment, no one spoke. May I join you? Corvain asked. It is your library, Valen replied coolly. I am asking permission, not asserting ownership. Something flickered in her expression. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. She nodded once. Corvain crossed to the table and sat across from them, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. Ren watched him like a hawk. What brings you here, Your Majesty? Valen asked. Surely you have kingdoms to run. I have questions, he said, about what happened to you after the ceremony, about what you have been doing in Thornwick. Does it matter? Everything about you matters. The words came out before he could stop them. Raw, honest, completely unguarded. Valen's breath caught. Ren's head tilted. You talk funny, the child observed. Corvain looked at her, startled. Do I? Yes. You sound like you have something stuck in your throat. Like when I tried to swallow a too big piece of bread once. A sound escaped Corvain. It took him a moment to realize it was a laugh, brief and rusty from disuse. Perhaps I do, he said. Have something stuck. You should drink water, Ren advised seriously. That is what Vey tells me. Corvain glanced at Vaylin. She was staring at him with an expression he could not read. She calls you Vay? Yes. Vaylin's voice was quieter now. She struggles with the full name. I like it, Corvain said. It suits you. Silence stretched. You had questions, Vaylin said finally. He did. Dozens of them. But looking at her now, in the soft library light, with a child who had somehow become hers pressed against her side, only one felt important. Are you happy? Vaylin blinked. In Thornwick, he clarified. These past months, despite everything. Are you happy? She was quiet for a long time. I am rebuilding, she said at last. Happiness is not the right word. But I am surviving. I am finding purpose. I am learning who I am when I am not trying to become what someone else wants. The words struck him like blows. That was never what I wanted, he said. For you to change who you were. No? She met his eyes. Then why did you stand in front of your entire kingdom and call me unfit? Because I was afraid. Of what? Of losing you to a lie. He looked down at his hands. My mother showed me evidence. Forged evidence I know now. But at the time, I believed it. I believed you had been using me. That everything between us had been a manipulation. And instead of questioning it, instead of asking you directly, I let my fear make the choice. Vaylin said nothing. I thought I was protecting myself, he continued. I thought if I rejected you first before you could betray me, I would not be destroyed by it. He laughed, bitter and hollow. I was wrong. The fire crackled. Ren had stopped pretending to write and was watching them both with wide eyes. You destroyed me instead, Vaylin said quietly. And then destroyed yourself anyway. Yes. Was it worth it? Corvain looked at her. At the woman who had walked away with her dignity intact while he had crumbled behind her. Nothing, he said, has ever been less worth it. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she stood, taking Ren's hand. I need time, she said. To think. To decide what any of this means. Take all the time you need, Corvain said. I will still be here. She paused at the door. That is what I am afraid of, she said softly. Then she was gone. That evening, Corvain received a message. Not through official channels. A folded paper slipped under his door while he was at dinner. He found it when he returned to his chambers, and the words on it made his blood turn to ice. Your pet from Thornwick grows too comfortable. Perhaps she needs another lesson in her proper place. You cannot protect her forever. And when she falls, you will watch, just as helpless as before. A friend, Corvain's hands crushed the paper. He knew that handwriting, had grown up seeing it on letters and documents and orders that shaped his entire life. His mother. She was not finished. Whatever game she was playing, whatever scheme had led her to forge those documents and destroy his bond with Vaylin, it was still in motion. And now Vaylin was here, in the fortress, vulnerable. Corvain moved before conscious thought caught up. Down the corridor, through the castle, to the guest chambers where Vaylin and the child were staying. He raised his hand to knock. The door was already open. Inside, the room was dark. The fire had burned low, and standing in the center of the chamber, frozen in place, was Vaylin. She was staring at him, not with anger, not with coldness, with fear. Something is wrong, she whispered. I heard footsteps outside the door, and then this. She held up a piece of paper. Corvain crossed to her and took it. The words were simple. The child first, then you. Then he will have nothing left. His entire body went cold. Where is Ren? He asked. I do not know. Vaylin's voice cracked. She was right here. I turned to check the door, and when I turned back, she was gone. Corvain looked at the window. Open. A rope of knotted sheets dangled over the sill. Someone had taken her. Valen, he said, reaching for her shoulders. Look at me. We will find her. I swear to you. She looked up at him, and for the first time since her return, her walls were completely gone. Just fear and desperation and a mother's anguish for a child that was not hers by blood, but was hers in every way that mattered. Please, she whispered. Please help me find her. And Corvain, who had failed her in every way that counted, made a vow to himself that he would not fail her now. I will find her, he said. Even if I have to tear this kingdom apart, stone by stone. He meant every word. Valen. The night had become a blur of torchlight and shouting voices. Guards swarmed the fortress. Search parties fanned out through the grounds. Corvain had transformed into something she had not expected, a commander in motion, issuing orders with deadly precision, his face carved from stone but his eyes burning with something that looked almost like panic. For Ren, a child he had met only days ago. Valen ran beside him through the corridors, refusing to be left behind, refusing to wait, while others searched for the only thing she had left that mattered. The rope on the window, Corvain said, as they descended a narrow staircase. It was tied from the inside. Whoever took her had help. Someone within the fortress. Your mother, Valen said. Corvain's jaw tightened. Yes? Why? What does she want? Control. His voice was bitter. She has always wanted control. Over me, over the throne, over everything. You were a threat to that control. So she destroyed you. And now that I have brought you back, now that I am questioning her, she is escalating. They burst through a door into the lower courtyard. Lord Brennick met them, his weathered face grim. We found tracks leading into the eastern forest, Your Majesty. Small boots, and larger ones beside them. How long ago? Less than an hour. The general's eyes moved to Valen. We can still catch them. Then we ride, Corvain said. Now. Horses were brought. Valen mounted without assistance, her hands steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. She had ridden since childhood, could handle any horse in any terrain, but none of that mattered if they were too late. Stay close to me, Corvain said, pulling his horse alongside hers. Whatever happens. She nodded. They rode. The forest swallowed them within minutes, dark trees rising like sentinels on either side of the narrow path. Torches bobbed ahead and behind as the search party spread through the undergrowth, calling Ren's name. Valen listened for a response. Only silence answered. They rode deeper. The trees grew thicker. The path narrowed until it was barely a track, and still they pressed on, following broken branches and disturbed earth. Then Corvain held up his hand. Everyone stopped. Ahead, through a gap in the trees, flickering light. Wait here, Corvain murmured to Brennick. Surround the clearing, but do not move until I signal. The general nodded. Corvain looked at Valen. You should stay. No. The word came out flat. Absolute. She is my daughter. I am coming. Something passed through his expression. Pain and admiration tangled together. Stay behind me, he said. They dismounted and moved through the trees on foot, silent as shadows. The clearing opened before them, and Valen's heart stopped. Lady Venora stood at the center, draped in a traveling cloak of deep crimson, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. She looked almost peaceful, almost beautiful, if not for the blade pressed against Ren's throat. The child was pale but conscious, her small hands bound before her, her eyes wide and fixed on the darkness where Valen crouched. Ren saw her, her mouth opened. Venora's hand tightened on the blade. Make a sound, little bird, and it will be your last. Ren went silent. Corvain stepped into the clearing. Mother. Venora smiled. Ah, there you are. I was wondering how long it would take. Release the child. No. Her voice was pleasant, conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. I do not think I will. You see, my son, you have become rather difficult lately, questioning things that should not be questioned, digging through archives, looking at that common girl like she is something worthy of a king. She is. Exactly. Venora's smile sharpened, and that is the problem. A king cannot afford attachments. Attachments make you weak. They give your enemies leverage. She lifted Ren slightly, making the child whimper. Like this. Valen felt rage building in her chest, white-hot and blinding. What do you want? Corvain asked. What I have always wanted. Order. Strength. A kingdom that does not crumble because its king is too busy mooning over a peasant girl to rule properly. She tilted her head. Send her away. Permanently. Marry Lady Isvara of House Crethon as I arranged. Produce heirs with proper bloodlines. Do these things, and the child lives. And if I refuse, then the child dies. Venora's voice did not waver. And when your beloved Valen comes running to save her, which we both know she will, she dies too. And you watch. Helpless. Broken. Just as you should have been from the beginning, before you became soft. Corvain stood very still. Valen could see the tension in every line of his body, the calculation in his eyes. He was measuring distances, angles, and possibilities. But the blade was too close to Ren's throat. Any movement and the child would die. You made me soft, Corvain said quietly. You raised me to be cold, ruthless, alone. And then you wonder why I cling to the first person who made me feel like something other than a weapon. Venora's expression flickered. You were meant to be a weapon. That is what kings are. No, kings are meant to protect, to serve, to love their people more than their own power. He took a step forward. You never understood that. You never wanted to. And because of your ambition, because of your scheming, I destroyed the one person who might have taught me what that meant. Pretty words. The blade pressed harder. Ren gasped. But they will not save the child. No, Corvain agreed. I will. He moved. Faster than Valen had ever seen a man move. Faster than should have been possible. The shift took him mid-stride, his body exploding into the massive black wolf that had haunted her dreams for 2 months. Venora's eyes went wide. She slashed, but the blade caught fur, not flesh, as Corvain's wolf form slammed into her, knocking her backward, sending Ren tumbling free. Valen was already running. She scooped Ren into her arms and kept moving, putting distance between them and the struggle behind her. Guards poured into the clearing, torches blazing, swords drawn. Vey, Ren sobbed against her neck. Vey, I was so scared. I know, baby, I know. You are safe now. I have you. But even as she spoke the words, she heard a sound that made her blood freeze, a cry of pain. Not human. Wolf. She turned. Corvain's wolf form lay on the ground, a crossbow bolt buried deep in his side. Behind him, a guard she did not recognize held the weapon, Venora screaming orders from where she had fallen. Kill him. Kill him now. He is no longer fit to rule. But Brennick was already there, his sword at the guard's throat. The old general's face was terrible in the torchlight. The only one dying tonight, he said coldly, is you. More guards swarmed Venora. They pulled her to her feet, bound her hands, and dragged her away screaming about weakness and betrayal and the downfall of everything she had built. Valen barely heard any of it. She was running again, Ren still clutched against her chest, dropping to her knees beside the fallen wolf. Corvain, she breathed. Corvain, please. The wolf's gray eyes, dark as thunderclouds, found hers. And then the shift took him again. Slower this time, painful, leaving a man lying in the frozen dirt with blood spreading beneath him. Ren, he managed, his voice barely a whisper. She is safe? She is safe. Valen's vision blurred with tears. Because of you. You saved her. Good. His eyes were dimming. That is good. Stay with me. She gripped his hand, felt how cold his fingers were. Do not you dare leave? Do you hear me? You do not get to die. Not like this. Not before. Before what? Before I decide if I can forgive you. A sound escaped him, almost a laugh. Then you had better decide quickly. His eyes closed. Corvain. But he did not answer. Corvain. He dreamed of her. Not the Valen who had walked away from him with her head held high, though that image lived behind his eyelids like a brand. No, he dreamed of a different version. Softer. Warmer. The Valen who had laughed at his terrible jokes during their courtship. The one who had written him letters full of observations about her village, about the way light fell through the trees, about the shape of clouds and the taste of fresh bread and all the small, beautiful things he had never learned to notice. He dreamed of the future they should have had, a garden somewhere warm, Wren running through tall grass, laughing, Valen beside him, her hand in his, watching their daughter with eyes full of quiet joy. Then the dream fractured, and there was only pain. He woke to firelight and the scent of herbs. The ceiling above him was unfamiliar. Stone, but older than the fortress. A healing house, perhaps, somewhere in the outer grounds. You are awake. He turned his head, slowly, and found Valen sitting in a chair beside his bed. She looked exhausted. Dark circles beneath her eyes. Hair loose and tangled. Clothing rumpled like she had not changed in days. How long? He managed. 4 days. Her voice was quiet. The healers were not sure you would survive. He tried to sit up. Pain lanced through his side, sharp and immediate, and he fell back with a groan. Do not move. Valen was on her feet instantly, her hands pressing him gently back against the pillows. The bolt nicked something vital. You lost a great deal of blood. My mother. Imprisoned. Valen's jaw tightened. Lord Brennick has taken control of the guard. The council is convening to decide her fate. Corvain closed his eyes. He should feel something. Grief, perhaps, for the mother he had never truly had. Relief that she could no longer hurt anyone. All he felt was tired. Wren? Asking about you every hour. Valen's voice softened. She wanted to see you, but I thought it best to wait until you were awake. She is all right? Shaken. But children are resilient. She is already demanding to know when you will be well enough to teach her sword fighting. A sound escaped him. Surprise, mostly. She wants me to teach her? Apparently, she has decided you are acceptable. Valen's mouth curved slightly. High praise from her. Corvain opened his eyes and looked at her. At this woman who had every reason to hate him, who had watched him nearly die and stayed anyway, who sat beside his bed looking like she had not slept in days. Why are you here? He asked. Valen was quiet for a long moment. Because Wren would not stop crying until I promised to stay with you, she said finally. Because the healers needed someone to make decisions, and there was no one else. Because... She stopped. Because? Because I am not ready for you to die. The words hung in the air between them. Corvain reached for her hand. She let him take it. I thought you had not decided, he said quietly. Whether to forgive me? I have not. Her fingers tightened around his. But I have decided something else. What? She looked at him and her eyes were wet. I have decided that I am tired of running, she said. Tired of protecting myself by refusing to feel anything. Tired of pretending that what happened between us did not matter. She took a breath. You hurt me. Worse than anyone has ever hurt me, and I do not know if I can forgive that. But I know that when I saw you fall, when I thought you were going to die, I felt my heart shatter. Something I did not even know was still whole. Valen. She shook her head. let me finish. I am not saying I love you. I am not saying I trust you. I am saying that I am willing to stay, to see what this could be, to let you try to earn back what you destroyed. She met his eyes. If that is what you want. Corvain looked at her, at the tears on her cheeks, at the hope and fear tangled together in her expression, at the woman who had walked away with her dignity intact and returned with something far more precious, a second chance. I do not deserve it, he said honestly. No, you do not. But you are offering it anyway. Yes. Her voice cracked. Because Ren believes in you. Because Brennick believes in you. Because somewhere, underneath all the pain and anger and betrayal, I believe there is a man worth believing in. Corvain lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss against her knuckles. Then I will spend every day proving you right, he said. For as long as you will let me. Vaylin looked at him for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, gentle enough not to hurt him, close enough that he could feel her breath on his skin. Do not make me regret this, she whispered. Never, he promised. Never again. They stayed like that for a long time, and for the first time in months, Corvain felt something he had forgotten existed. Hope. 3 months later. The garden was in full bloom. Vaylin stood beneath the archway of climbing roses, watching Ren chase butterflies across the grass. The child moved with a freedom she had not possessed when they first met, her laughter ringing through the warm afternoon air. She is happy. Vaylin turned. Corvain stood behind her, his recovery complete now, the scar on his side the only remaining evidence of how close he had come to death. He looked different than he had during those dark months. Lighter somehow. The shadows had not entirely left his eyes, but they no longer consumed him. She is, Vaylin agreed. Thanks to you. To us. The words settled between them, warm and weighted. 3 months of rebuilding. 3 months of difficult conversations and careful boundaries, and the slow, painful work of learning to trust again. 3 months of Corvain proving, one small action at a time, that he meant every promise he had made. He had not been perfect. There were still moments when he retreated into old patterns, when his walls rose and his words sharpened. But he always caught himself, always apologized, always tried again. And slowly, impossibly, Vaylin had begun to believe. Ren came running toward them, her cheeks flushed, her hair wild. There are so many butterflies today. Do you think they know it is a special day? Vaylin smiled. Perhaps they do, little bird. Corvain crouched to Ren's level, a movement that had become natural to him over the months. What makes today special? Ren looked at him with exaggerated patience. Because you are asking Vey to stay forever. Everybody knows. Corvain's ears turned red. Vaylin felt laughter bubbling in her chest. Who told you that? Corvain demanded. Lord Brennick. Ren beamed. He said you have been practicing in your chambers. He said you keep forgetting the words? Corvain closed his eyes. I am going to exile him. Vaylin laughed outright. So there are words? Corvain stood slowly, his face still flushed, and looked at her with an expression that made her breath catch. There were supposed to be, he said. I had a whole speech prepared. About atonement, about gratitude, about how you have changed everything I thought I knew about myself. He reached for her hands. But Ren is right. Words are not my strength. So let me just say this. He met her eyes. Stay, he said simply. Not because I deserve it, not because I have earned it, but because I cannot imagine any version of the future that does not have you in it. You and Ren, here, with me. Vaylin felt tears pricking her eyes. I am asking you to be my Luna, he continued, to rule beside me, to help me build something better than what came before. But more than that, I am asking you to be my family, my home, the place I belong. He paused. Will you? Valen looked at him, at this man who had once shattered her, who had spent every day since trying to put the pieces back together, who had taken an arrow for a child he barely knew and looked at her like she was the answer to every question he had ever asked. She thought about the ceremony, about the rejection, about walking away without tears. She thought about all the pain that had followed, and she thought about everything that had come after. She squeezed his hands. Yes, she said. His entire face transformed. Yes? Really? Yes. Her smile broke through. But you should know that Ren comes first. Always. I would not have it any other way. Ren threw herself at both of them, small arms wrapping around their legs. I knew it. I knew you would say yes. Can I have a crown too? Corvain laughed, lifting her into his arms. We will see about that. Valen watched them, her heart so full it ached. This was not the future she had imagined standing in that great hall all those months ago. It was not the life she had planned or the ending she had expected. It was better. Vey, Ren said, are we a family now? Valen looked at Corvain. He was looking back at her with those gray eyes, soft and unguarded and full of something that looked exactly like love. Yes, Valen said. We are a family now. Ren cheered. Corvain reached for Valen's hand and pulled her close, and in a garden full of roses and butterflies and the laughter of a child who had finally found where she belonged, the Alpha King who had once rejected everything kissed the woman who had taught him how to heal. The war was over. They were home.